Welcome to The Plunge with Derek Holser. Joining me today is a returning guest and a fan favorite, Eugene Terekhin. Eugene is a philologist, philosopher, translator, as well as the author of Elven Hidden Gems in the works of the Inklings, the music of Illuvatar in the Worlds of J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, and Owen Barfield. He is a deep, deep thinker. As always, this episode is filled with his winsome wit and his well-earned wisdom. So I'm so thankful you could join us, and I'm grateful to Eugene for once again being willing to take the plunge. Let's dive in. Thrilled to have welcoming back for the second time on the plunge, my friend Eugene Terekhin. And Eugene, we had a great conversation about Owen Barfield's Silver Trumpet. And now we're going to talk a little bit about a Tolkien character, but I'm going to save that for a second. How you been?
I've been good, thank you. Trying not to melt here in Texas. Yeah, it's hard.
Nice and hot there. What's your temperature right about now?
Oh, it's in the 90s. Actually, it's not been that bad. I mean, I remember summers when it was like around 100, which here with this humidity is like, you don't want to be outside.
Well, you got to escape during the summer a little bit, and sounds like you had quite an epic road trip.
Yeah, we did.
Where all did you go again?
Well, we went west this time. Actually, our first trip west in the United States. So we went to Grand Canyon first, and then Monterey, California, then Lake Tahoe, then the next one was Salt Lake City. They have really nice mountains, and I have not been able to figure out what they're called. But right outside of Salt Lake City, I mean, there's very picturesque mountains with alpine lakes. Alpine fields, meadows, and those were gorgeous, absolutely. So then we went to Mount Rushmore, Badlands, and then Minnesota, and then down to Texas again. So quite a loop.
Lots of fun. Does the alpine meadows remind you at all of your home?
Well, not where I'm from. I mean, the town I'm from is Omsk, which is very flat. Actually, very similar landscape to Houston. But if you want to get to mountains, you need to go a little bit of south of Omsk, about 1,000 kilometers south. We get the Altai Mountains that are very, very gorgeous. Absolutely.
Nice. Well, since we brought up Omsk, I was wondering, maybe for those who are first meeting you, could you tell us a little bit about your own life story and how you've ended up in Houston, Texas?
Yes. So I was born in Russia, Soviet Union back then, in the city of Omsk, OMSK. It's 53 degrees of northern latitude. I don't know, it probably corresponds to something in Canada. So, I grew up in a pretty atheistic society. My parents were atheists. Everybody I knew was an atheist, as far as I remember. And, but one thing that was really interesting to watch as a child is that when God is forbidden and when spirituality is forbidden, God starts peeping. I mean, what will be the right word? Like breaking through in ways that really catch people unawares. So I don't know. As I thought about your question this morning, a quote came to mind by a philosopher. Richard Kearney, his name is. So he came up with the term anatheism, basically from the word ana, which means again, and theism is God. So basically it's like God after God, or meeting God after God. And he's basically saying, like, in societies, in most atheistic societies that have killed God, that have gotten rid of God, they somehow rediscover the sacred through other means. And that was, especially in the 80s when I was growing up, I mean, you could feel this growing sense of the sacred ever like coming. It wasn't like a dominating thing, but it was more like a call, a silent but very tangible call. You
Hmm.
could hear it in people's movies that they made, in the books that they wrote. To this day, if you go to YouTube and watch what people say in the comments, like on YouTube under like Soviet era movies, you'd be surprised because people see the sacred. They just see the sacred, and so it just made me think of Richard Kearney, and he basically said that in the age of atheism, the only way we can talk about God is through our encounter with a sacred stranger. And so that just an
Hmm.
encounter with a sacred. And so one thing that, growing up, I had a tree growing outside of my house. And probably when I was 10, for some reason, I thought it was alive. So I started talking to the tree. It was a maple. And it was so fun because it gave me a sense, just this sensation that there's something out there that is larger than what I see with these physical eyes. And it was an incredible feeling that I could actually ask, and I had an agreement with the tree. Like if you say yes, that means if you wave a branch, it means yes. If you don't wave a branch, it means no. So I would ask it all sorts of questions, and it would respond. Would have this conversation. Anyway, but it was so much fun. But later, when I grew up, I was kind of thinking back about this whole experience of talking to a tree. And again, I had this sensation of encountering the sacred. And because when you realize that there's a world beyond the world, and it is interested in you, and it is looking at you, it does something to you. It kind of turns you around, you know. So it's a little bit about my childhood, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. And now you've been in the States for a good while now. Is that correct?
Yeah, 9 years on you.
Yeah. Well, um, man, every time I think about you, first of all, I think about your exquisite essays on a variety of topics. The Tolkien and Lewis and fantasy and fairy tale. But I also think about the way that you describe that God seeping in through the edges, no matter what the authorities tried or how people attempted to control, the human desire for the sacred remains.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, very much so.
Now, one of those folks that you write about is Mr. Tolkien, and I'm wondering if you would share how you first encountered Tolkien and what was that experience like?
Yeah, I was uh yeah, surprisingly, I first encountered Lewis, C.S. Lewis in Narnia. I didn't get to Tolkien until early 2000s. I first watched the first movie in the Peter Jackson's movies. And after watching it, I just realized it's another encounter with this sacred. So I have to read the book. So I started reading the book, and I'm still reading it because I've read it 100 times, and I'm still like, I have it in audio. So every once in a while, I have a chance, like I would go back to this place and re-listen to this place, and then and it keeps speaking to me. So of course, I got interested in the Silmarillion, and it's gonna be my second round through it because it's such a heavy reading. So
Amazing. That's so neat. I think there probably was quite a revival of people reading the books after those movies were made. So
yes, so I don't know if it
uh,
would have got me interested unless I first watched the movie.
that's great. Well, in this series, everyone has the opportunity to choose a character, and most of the guests got their first choice. Not everyone, because a few people chose the same person, but you are the only person who chose this character, and I would love to know, although I probably have a clue after you just shared your childhood story, but why did you choose Treebeard?
Yes, yes, yes. I was thinking about Treebeard as well. Because yeah, first of all, remember that moment? It was done pretty well in the movies. I mean, I can pick on Peter Jackson for a lot of things, but this one he did pretty well. So the first encounter that Merry and Pippin have with Treebeard is when they enter this Fengorn forest, and they are picked up by something, and I don't know what it is. And so they look around, and the first thing they see is those eyes, huge eyes of something that is alive. And of course, they get scared, which is understandable, but then they get to meet this person. And so it's just this, I guess, this sensation that reminded me, uh, in spiritual terms, what I experienced as a child talking to a tree. Because it's the same thing that when suddenly you look out there and you see eyes, spiritually speaking, you see that the world is not just an object, but it looks at you. It talks to you, it relates to you. I mean, you experience that sensation of connection, of being looked at. I believe it was a Russian priest and theologian, Pavel Florensky, who actually spoke a lot about iconography and why in pretty much all the ancient icons, the iconographers used the reverse perspective, where they would draw a picture of reality like a child would. So, like in direct perspective, all the lines converge in a distance, like inside the picture, whereas in reverse perspective, all the lines converge in you. So you are the center in iconography. And he wrote quite an extensive work in the 30s, I believe, or maybe in the 1920s, about that. That basically the point of an iconic worldview is to catch that gaze directed from outside into you. It's not as important what I see out there. It's important that I understand that I am being looked at, just like a child would. Because when children are looked at, they come alive, and they really thrive on being looked at. And so, and I mean, that particular moment kind of popped up in my mind as I thought about, this conversation with you tonight. And I thought, wow, it's really, really comparable with what I felt as a child. So that's one of the reasons. There's another reason that actually my wife reminded me of. I totally forgot about it, but I did write an essay about it one time. It's the whole idea of a name, because remember Treebeard, when he speaks to Pippin, I believe, Pippin asks him, "What is your name?" And he says basically, "Well, my name is too long to tell you, because my name grows with my life, with my story." And it is my story, basically. And so that's just and then of course he refers to the Entish language, and then he actually speaks. Tolkien actually came up with a little bit of that language, and he speaks in that language, where every Entish word seems to be the embodiment of some tree-ish life, like the creaking of the branch, or the trembling of the leaf, or this moisture of the forest. I mean, they're all kind of embodied in the Entish words, in the names. So anyway, that's
Oh,
another thing.
that's fabulous. Wow, the idea of the name unfolding with every passing, stage, and it becoming the story, that resonates deeply. I'd love to read that essay, if you still have it around.
Yeah.
Awesome. My next question is connected to Treebeard's nature. and he's the eldest of the Ents. And I guess just speak to any thoughts you have with respect to that sort of rootedness that the trees represent symbolically, and as you say, the icon pointing back to us, that we're being seen in the moment where Treebeard sees. Just your thoughts on that sort of role that Treebeard plays within both the Fangorn Forest, but also with the hobbits.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I have to tell you another story related from my life, and I actually shared it with my wife, and she said, "Why do you always talk about yourself? I mean, that's not what you're there for. You're supposed to talk about Treebeard." I'm like, I don't know, but it's just everything is connected somehow. But anyway, it was fun. But we had so much fun at Lake Tahoe this about a month ago, climbing mountains. And one day, we were all together, like all the five of us in the family. We climbed that mountain, and it was like a bare rock on top. So we're standing there looking at this beautiful lake on one side, beautiful lake on the other side. And I strolled a little bit by myself, and then I sat down, and the first thing I saw on that bare rock was a very tiny branch, like sprout of a pine tree, like a fresh, and it was just like we're growing a bare rock. And so I looked into it, and I saw that it actually cracked the rock. It somehow it just cracked it a little bit, and it was such an icon at that moment because Tolkien talks a lot about in the Lord of the Rings and in the Silmarillion. He talks about the power of growing. Like, first of all, the hobbits love all things that grow, and Treebeard talks about the love of all living things, and then he also opposes Saruman, and he says about Saruman that he doesn't care about living things. He has a mind of metal and something like that. So he doesn't care about growing things. But also, I believe Tolkien mentioned in his letter to something here. Let me cross it out. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, he basically says that, in this whole conflict between Saruman and the Ents, we see the juxtaposition, like the fight between the machine and the power of growing. And basically, what he calls the machine is or magic, black magic. He kind of equates the two. He basically says that it's like using any external means or devices or apparatus to impose your will on the world, like bulldoze other people's wills. And this machine is the technology, basically, or magic that helps you do this quickly and efficiently. Whereas he says the opposite of that is what he calls the magic of Ents, which is not magic at all, actually. It's like art. It's sub-creation. And the way he the way he opposes the two is really curious to me, is because he says, like, for example, elvish ropes. I'm sorry, elvish ropes or elvish robes. They look really magical because they have all these qualities, incredible qualities. And yet, he says, the way that they were made is entirely different from the way that the orcs or Saruman would make something and then call it technology. Because an elf, actually Pippin is the one who asks one of the elvish leaders, one of the elves, as they walk, it's like, are these cloaks magical? And this guy says, I don't know what you mean. All we do is we put the thought of everything we love into everything we do. And so Tolkien kind of in this letter, he says an elf, basically what he does is develops his inner talents and develops his inner like who he is, basically. and whatever they do grows from that. It's not an outside thing like something external, like the machine. Like, for example, a machine will work regardless of who wields it. I mean, you just pick up, press a button or pay cash to someone. Like, money is the machine because it doesn't care who holds it, you know. Whereas with art, it doesn't work that way. I mean, if you create a piece of art or if you craft a lesson as a teacher, it has to grow from you. It has to kind of spring. And so Tolkien kind of describes this interesting tension between two types of, I don't know how to call this. One is technology or black magic, which is the weapon, the power of the enemy. And another one is basically subcreation or art. So an elf would first and foremost listen to the music of Illuvatar in everything around him. And then he would pick up his chisel and start carving a boat. And when he is in that zone, in that music, totally aligned with it, what comes out of it, like the work of his hands, will be magical. And that's what we see. We see it in the lembas bread. We see it in the super light boats, in fials, in the buildings, in the elvish rope, right, and all kinds of things. The elves, when even in the swords, because Frodo's sword was elvish, the sting, and it would have this magical capacity to glow when the orcs were near, and things like that. So it's not magic. There was no button to push, but it would be like in something inherent in the elves, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, the thought that comes to my mind is it's alive.
Yes.
When that word magic, right? There's life imbued within it, even though its form is not necessarily organic as we think of a biological being. But there's something about it that carries the life of its creator into whatever it's used and designed for. That is also poetic and beautiful within the very fabric of its being.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what he's getting at.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, the sort of coming out from within too, I think about obviously the trees are coming forth from the earth, just as that little sapling cracked the rock. You have Treebeard and the Ents in the forest coming from the ground versus Saruman's forces, wielding things on the outside, shaping it to their will. I would imagine Treebeard's being shaped because, as you described, the elves being in alignment with the music. And I think we've all experienced that. I'm really curious about the pivotal role, and you described that scene where Treebeard reveals himself, and then of course the big role that Treebeard plays in battling back against Saruman's forces. Just some thoughts that you have on that be great.
It's it's really interesting that in the story, there's almost like I'd say fight. Maybe there's a different word, like opposition, I'd say, between the machine and the power of drawing. The power of drawing, what surprises me the most is that it is dormant. It is almost unobserved. It's hard to observe it. Like, for example, when I look outside and see those saplings, I mean, they look so fragile, look so little, and then they grow a little bit, and then you don't notice it, and then grow a little bit, and then you don't notice it. It's almost like there's a huge power there that is dormant, and you don't see it until it cracks the rock. And then you just don't, and then you stand there, you just like, how can this be? Because this power is stronger than the rock, And in fact, this is exactly, to quote Treebeard, when he stirs all the other trees into battle. That's what he says. My business is with Isengard, tonight with rock and stone, and then they split rocks and throw the rocks. So there's so much metaphor there about the dormant power. And one thing that comes to mind also is that it seems like nature itself revolts against being bulldozed. And it represents to me something like, if you go back in myth, like, Plato mentions this city of Atlantis that pretty much was destroyed because of their hubris and whatever, now Tolkien's Numenor was pretty much sunk by this wave and the splitting of Arda. And so all these, like the Great Flood, of course, comes to mind. And even the cursing of the world on account of Adam, it seems like even the nature itself, creation itself, is so bound to who we are. And if we go against the music and lose this inner harmony, it doesn't want to comply. There's something that gets distorted there. And it will lie dormant up to a point, and then it will erupt in some volcano. And that's, it's not even like a punishment, but it's basically just like a natural consequence of, the cacophony that we create, often. So,
like reverberating back upon us. Would it be, I don't know the right word, but something about the way you described that hiddenness, that dormant power, almost as a Christological symbol. I don't know if that resonates with you, but that's what comes to mind.
yeah, very much so. Because there's a prophecy about Christ that he will grow up as a gentle shoot, from the stump of Jesse and things like that, from the whole lineage of David. And he will come. I mean, he came as a child. Who would think that he could do any big damage to the arch enemy of mankind? But that's exactly what happened. The dormant power. Well, one interesting thing about this also, as I thought about the power of growing, is that it can be really powerful, really mighty, like the eruption of a volcano. But it is, every time, I don't know about you, but every time I see a thunderstorm, I feel this incredible paradox, because it's really, I mean, in Houston, some of the thunderstorms are like, I mean, menacing, really. And we had just, about a week ago, we had quite a thunderstorm. And so you feel that an immense power there, but it is beautiful. And it contains this incredible call inherent in that thing. There's almost like I guess it's a paradox. It's just that you feel the power and you feel awe at the same time. And as opposed to the machine, the machine is just power, and it doesn't have this call. It creates fear, whereas this is powerful, and it creates the sensation of a call, a sensation of a beauty, and so it's just a thought. I guess I had a passing thought about that, this afternoon.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, and it makes me think of the sort of magnificence of the forest and the minuscule embodiment of the hobbits in contrast to this. And I have a couple of questions correlating to that. First of all, as you describe, nature's the consequence of our cacophony resounding with some, vibration that shakes it to its core. I wanted to know, first of all, your thoughts on Treebeard's initial reluctance to engage with the issues beyond the forest. And then if you could talk a little bit about Pippin's persuasiveness and getting him to go into it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't say that I thought a lot about it, but it's just something that just comes to me, is that For example, when Adam sinned, the earth was cursed on his account, and so it started growing those thorns and thistles. But it probably didn't happen overnight. It just happened, over some time. It took some time. The same with like pretty much anything. Like, for example, if I choose to sin in a certain area of my life, I will not see consequences right away. Maybe sometimes it's right away, but most of the time it's not. But what's interesting to me is that it seems like there's if if something is right, you don't see it right away. If something is wrong, you don't see it right away. So it lies dormant for quite a long time, maybe for centuries. And Tolkien kind of hints on that in The Lord of the Rings. So basically, the tree is old and angry, he says about Fengorn. Well, no, the forest is old and angry. And so it means that it's been sitting on something's been sizzling there for quite a while. But it takes a lot to stir that power into motion, into action. And it's maybe to our benefit, because if it was too quick to anger, I don't know what would have happened. Yeah, but then it's interesting you mentioned Pippin's persuasiveness, because Pippin is a hobbit, and hobbits also are creatures that are from the ground. They live in smeals, whatever these things are called, like the holes, and they love all things that grow. They have roots. They have lore. They have tradition. They have long-bottom leaf that they smoke. They're like the people from the earth, little people from the earth, like shoots. But they are somewhat different, of course, than the trees and the ants. But it's interesting that it takes a hobbit to sort of stir, have this final drop that really breaks the camel's back. But I forgot how the whole scene developed in the book now. But I think in the movie, I think Pippin kind of turns Treebeard to a place where a lot of his kin were basically, burnt, and
Yeah, he forces him to see what's really happening, which is a whole nother interesting commentary.
yeah, what's really happening, exactly, and then it happens. So, yeah,
It's interesting because obviously Tolkien is passionate about environment, ecology, and experienced a lot of turmoil regarding the Industrial Revolution during his lifetime and the machines of war. And I guess I'm curious, in your estimation, just for today and going forward, do you see any traction or resonance continuing with his work and with these stories in a way that could be meaningful for future generations?
yes, very much so. I am very interested in his view on basically subcreation and art, because he, as far as I understand, he believes it's the only antidote to the machine. And we see in our age, we see the rise of the machine to such a degree. I mean, and it is accelerating, that unheard of, basically. And a lot of people, I mean, as a translator and writer, I understand that a lot of people in my profession have this dilemma with ChatGPT and AI and all these things rising. It's like, but in Tolkien's mind, when we engage in subcreation, basically when we sit down and attune to the music of Illuvatar, we overcome the machine inside. Because I have a great temptation to use the machine. But then if I, in a final analysis, if I ask myself why, I'll have to say, because I want this and that. It's my will be done. So the machine is like anti-prayer, because prayer is thy will be done. And here it is anti-prayer. Whereas art and sub-creation, basically, nobody can create any art unless they first attune to the source of beauty. And then they will want to capture it and express it in what they do. Whether it's an artist, whether it's a teacher crafting a lesson, whether it's a translator or a writer, you can't really create anything worthy unless you first immerse yourself in this prayerful mode, so to say, in this. Can I hear the beauty out there? Can I see it? Can I catch that fire? And then I'll be able to express it. It will come through me as a piece of art, for instance. And in this prayerful process, there's no place for the machine, because it's just the opposite thing. And so it's really interesting that especially nowadays, and every day there's something new about generative AI, generative this, generative that. But then you also, and at the end of the day, you ask yourself, what is generative? Generative comes from Genesis, or from the word gene, or from birth, the birth. How can you birth something into the world unless it comes from your womb? It has to come through you. And so, of course, no machine can do that. Machines can't get pregnant. We can, relatively. Spiritually speaking, we all are like mothering God into the world.
That's, boy, a lot to process, I think, given where we're at in the stage of the way things are unfolding. I'm I I'm so perplexed by that rhythm and that balance in my own life, as you say, the desire to use the machine because I want, and the perpetual echo in my own heart of efficiency as the chief end. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that mindset as well.
Yeah, yeah. I do feel the same. It's efficiency. But then it's interesting. I think actually I heard it in one of the previous episodes on your podcast that you had with someone. I believe the lady was talking about the suffering, the role of suffering and dying. What is interesting is that every time we decide to attune ourselves to the music of the spheres, the music of God, we have to die to ourselves, because our will has to die. If I still elevate my will, I will not be able to create anything worthwhile. And so there's this necessary process of being crucified with Christ that is inherent in art and in subcreation. And it's just, when I think about efficiency, yeah, the machine allows me to get things done quickly and without suffering and without dying. And the temptation sometimes is so great, but I realize if I want to see beauty and art, this dying is part of the process. Such a part and parcel of the whole thing. And it's actually in this process, in the dying, that the birth happens, of the new thing. It's something that I don't hear a lot of talk about that. It's an element that's so present in the Gospels, of course, being crucified with Christ and allowing him to live through you. And no art is possible unless we experience that, daily.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that episode was with Carrie Dearborn, I'm guessing.
Yes.
The George MacDonald series. Yeah. She's a really spectacular person. I'm so grateful for her conversation and her role and her own work on George MacDonald. That's for sure. Okay, I want to ask a different question. So we've talked about the goodness and the beauty and the richness of what Tolkien's representing, and we've talked about Treebeard's ancientness. I'm wondering if you could point out any flaws in Treebeard's character or nature.
Well, that was a hard one, to tell you the truth, because I was all focused on what's good about him. But I think all nature is somehow warped by our cacophony in one way or another. So every day I would walk in this little grove, here outside. I have a creek and a little bit of woods. Every once in a while, we have so many, like, what are they called? Vines that are really thorny. And every once in a while, I get caught up and really scratch myself bad, with, like, it's start bleeding, with bad scratch. And I'm like, damn it, like, what's going on? I thought I was careful, and yet I got caught. But at the same time, when I forget about that and look around, and there's so much beauty around me in the same place. And I think Treebeard sort of, like, is a walking paradox in that regard as well, because he represents this power of growing and the power of beauty, that splits rocks and basically does away with the filth of Saruman, you know. But at the same time, it's this power can be dormant, it can be obstinate, it can, you sort of, need to do something to arouse it into action. And I don't know, but it's interesting that, when you go out into nature, you realize it's just a mix of different things.
Yeah. Well, what came to mind as you were sharing that just now is the reciprocal nature of the very breath of us and the trees with oxygen and carbon dioxide.
Uh-huh.
And so it just that process of symbiosis that exists so that both species can be alive
But yeah,
on the planet, right?
yes, yes, yeah. The trees create the oxygen for us. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know what that has to do with the story, but just another layer of this indescribable, undeniable connection that we have, and as you point out, perhaps the effect that our actions have on that relationship, uh, and how it manifests in things that later probably cause us more harm than good.
It also reminds me of the stories of some saints, like I know in Russian, Serafim of Sarov, who actually was on uh, good terms with bears. Bears would come to visit him, and the same stories about Francis of Assisi, that he would talk and even preach to birds and preach to a wolf, and they would listen. And so it's like there's a reverse side to the whole thing, that our cacophony can cause damage to the world we live in. But at the same time, when we uh, get attuned back to the music of God, then even nature itself also gets realigned somehow with us and with this invisible harmony as well.
Yeah. Would you touch on the notion of subcreation as you understand it? You've said that a few times, and maybe not everybody's familiar with what Tolkien meant by that.
Yeah, I think subcreation, he means basically, to quote him, he means creating in the law in which we were created. Basically, man has this birthright of being a creator in the same law that he was created, as he was created. So it means that if we're able to uh, capture that, to speak in Barfieldian terms, that sound, that word that created the worlds, then that gives you the inspiration and the inner fire, to create something magical in this world, alive. And that's what the elves were doing for the most part, because of who they were. And most of them, not all of them, but most of them were in tune with the music of Illuvatar. And that's why they created all of the things that they created. Like Galadriel created this realm of Lothlorien with everything there, that seemed magical, but it was actually like the overflow of that sub creation. And everybody is really a sub creator just by birthright. And I'm just thinking the other day, I was sitting at this cafe in the morning. I was hungry, and I saw one guy who was a waiter, and he looked pretty. He was doing all the right things, going from table to table and helping, and very polite. But I could see in his eyes, he was kind of maybe sad, maybe he was not in the zone. He was just, not quite there, you know. But at the same time, there were other cases where I would sit and somebody would, like wait on the tables and help, and I could see that this person was enthusiastic and on fire about what they were doing, even though nobody. I mean, they didn't have to be so kind and so like go the extra mile for you, and do something that really really is nice, or I don't know how to describe this. But then you really catch the difference, and sometimes you see a teacher who's really is just delivering their subject. They're not in the zone. They're not passing the fire that they caught. They're just regurgitating some textbook. Whereas and other times you see somebody else, like a teacher, who, I mean, from the first sentence or like first paragraph that they say, you realize that they are on fire, and you almost see the dance of the fairies in their eyes, or see it in the talk that they give. Because I've been following a couple of philosophers just recently like that, and it's just amazing how this subcreation is really something that we all can do almost with. I mean, I can't imagine any industry or human sphere of human activity where it's not available.
Yeah. Well, the thing that keeps coming back to me is the difference between mechanical and alive, and that idea that you're talking about with being aligned to the music and it coming forth from within, and even the generative, right? To give birth to something means that you yourself are fully alive, and the thing that is going to be born will be something unlike all the others. Even if I guess if it's okay, I'd love to just take a little aside and talk about your own work in craftsmanship. Even though you might make similar pieces, they're never going to be identical. And that is probably one of the biggest differentiators between the mechanistic and the living. Would you agree?
Oh, yes, very much so. Well, just the other day, I was shipping a couple of lamps, make them out of twigs, and I kind of screw them together with a lampshade that I make myself. And so I was sitting there and I was just looking at it before shipping, and for some reason, all of a sudden I just felt that one of them lacked one brand. I mean, there should be another branch to it. And so I went around and I looked for the right twig, and so I kind of made it ready, kind of cleaned it a little bit, and then I came up to this lamp, and I tried it and tried to fit it here, fit it there. So it was like a really really interesting process of finding where it will fit the most. And I'm just like, and I asked myself the question, but how do I know where it fits? And then I just know, because it's there's like a blueprint. We're all like platonics, at heart, because we, even without seeing what a perfect lamp looks like the ideal lamp, we sort of know how it would look, or at least we can do something to get closer to that idea of a lamp. And so, yeah, of course, when I put the branch back in place and screwed it, I really liked it. I said, "Oh, that's good, and that's much better." But it's funny how it works.
Yeah, well, I think of the golden ratio. I think of the symmetry that happens in beauty, and not just obviously in things that we can see with our eyes, but things we can hear with our ear. When you talk about sound and harmony and resonance, and all of it speaks of a kind of that subcreation. Let's turn for home with coming back to Treebeard, and I'm curious about the anything that you think with respect to what Tolkien wrote in addition to his actual stories. If there was anything connected to Treebeard that you would see in other mythologies or in ancient stories, and I know Tolkien was very much trying to create and perhaps succeeded in creating a mythology for his people. He very much loved the Nordic stories and so on. Any thoughts on what Treebeard might have been connected to in his mind?
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember one of the photos of Tolkien that you can easily find in the internet online is him sitting uh, almost like underneath a tree in the roots, like leaning against a tree, almost like they're like kindred spirits, or they're like brothers in spirit. And so it's kind of fun to look at this picture and think about, he there was a certain atmosphere, certainly, that he wanted to recreate with his trees. And one thing that strikes me also is that the Ents actually came into being also through the magic of the elves. So, because Treebeard explains where the Ents came from, and he says that the elves started it back way, 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 in the Silmarillion times, when they started talking to trees. They always talked to everything, those old Ents, elves did. And so when they started talking to us, it wasn't just the sound waves, basically. Those words were alive. And as they talked to us, some of us got awakened and we became ants, the shepherd of the trees. But those ants that stopped speaking back to the elves, they slowly, gradually turned back into wood, because you have to continue the conversation that makes you alive. So if you continue that conversation that makes you alive, you will remain alive, and you will keep growing like that, like that tree that Tolkien was sitting under, and I'm sure he saw himself probably as a tree, probably, I don't know, but he could have easily seen himself as a tree.
Yeah, I love the idea of those ongoing talking conversations, even being something that nurtures. And as you point out, that the cessation of speaking leads to death. So that's certainly a powerful image for sure.
Yeah. I believe it's probably part of the reason that the Inklings met in the first place, because they somehow could feel that when you keep up that conversation, something is being born. Something. It's like uh, idea when you hear somebody else's words or somebody else's ideas. It's like something is being planted in you. Like you're like becoming sort of pregnant with an idea, and then you bear it like in your womb for a while, and then something gets born through some suffering and the dying to self, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I think too of the comparison between a stagnant pond and a flowing river. For me, the continuing conversations that I get to have now through this podcast, but in my own life, not just with the people who sort of we all kind of think the same way, but really having those conversations with opposite or different or alternative ideas actually keeps me active and sharp and alive and growing and considering and reflecting, all the sort of behaviors that you would expect from something that's still really engaged in being alive.
hmm Yeah, I can relate to that very much, and that's why I value friends that really are in the same wavelength as me. I mean, It's just it's something because it allows me to remain who I am, and that's really the greatest treasure that one can have. Uh, so
Yeah, well, there's no question about it, Eugene, for me and for thousands of people who have read your work and have listened to you. Definitely you being who you are and staying true to that is a treasure for all of us. I mean that. I'm so grateful that our paths have crossed
thank you for your
because
friendship as well. It's amazing. Yeah.
yeah, there's rarely well, there's not a week that goes by, but seldom is there a day that goes by that one of your essays comes into my email, and
Mhm.
I jump on that because it keeps inviting me back to the mystical, the magical, the ancient, and the true, and really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
One last question.
Yes.
uh, Sort of the catch-all of any philosophical, spiritual, moral ideas that Treebeard represents to us, and what we can glean from Treebeard's role in the arc of Middle Earth.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I keep thinking about that episode where um now it's vague in my memory, but when Treebeard uh, sort of starts speaking, he forgets a word in the common tongue, and he speaks in Entish, and it sounds like bararum, sound like this bararum, and then he sort of explains what it means, but he doesn't quite, he's not able to really convey it in the common tongue. But he says it's almost like the words that I'm speaking are reminiscent of everything that a tree is, like that. That the words that I say are the tree life, the creaking of the trunk, and then the swaying in the wind, and this damp smell of the early morning and the first rays of the sun. So it's all in the words, and we kind of speak it. And it's just I don't know, for some reason I thought about that even the words that we say, if our very being depends on these conversations and the words that we say. I mean, it's I mean, where do these words come from? I think they do come from be, not a being, but just being, capital B. Words are born from that being, just like Treebeard is in touch with being, and even his words really kind of they don't just express, but they sort of bring into being that which they call, you know, and so I believe that if we really get connected to being and really speak those words of being, I believe we're gonna be really seeing a lot of joy coming into from that, and a lot of joy and fire.
I love that. I love joy and fire going together, keeping us alive. Um, Thanks so much, Eugene, for being a part of this. Again, it's just a delight to interact with you and look forward to the next time.
It's a pleasure always. Thank you.
Today's episode is sponsored by the poem or the song. I'm going to just read it as a poem. The Song of the Ent and the Entwife, a poem recited to Merry and Pippin by Treebeard concerning the longing of the Ents for their lost Ent wives. And now, The Song of the Ent and the Entwife by J.R.R. Tolkien. Ent. When spring unfolds the beechen leaf and sap is in the bough, when light is on the wildwood stream and wind is on the brow, when stride is long and breath is deep, and keen the mountain air. Come back to me, and say my land is fair. Entwife. When spring is come to garth and field, and corn is in the blade, when blossom like a shining snow is on the orchard laid, when sun and shower upon the earth with fragrance fill the air, I'll linger here and will not come, because my land is fair. Both. Together we will take the road that leads into the west, and far away we'll find a land where both our hearts may rest. Thank you to the Song of the Ent and the Entwife for sponsoring today's episode of The Plunge.